Hey, welcome back. I'm glad you're here tonight. Before we begin, maybe do me a little favor. Go ahead, dim the lights just a bit more. Hold that blanket up around your shoulders. Let the days slip away while you settle into the warmth of your bed. There you go. It's just you and me now, and a story that, well, might make you appreciate your bathroom more than ever. Tonight, we're going to drift back, way back, into a time when the idea of indoor plumbing was as far-fetched as flying to the moon. A time of stone castles perched on damp hills, crooked timber houses lining muddy streets, and people who smelled, well, let's just say, earthy. And tonight, we're not talking about feasts or justs or royal banquets. No, we're talking about what came after the banquets. What really happened when nature called in the Middle Ages. Picture the echo of your own heartbeat in the dark, stone corridors of a medieval keep. Somewhere nearby, a moat laps lazily against mossy walls. A cold wind sneaks in through a crack in the shutters. And deep inside this fortress of ancient stone, tucked away in towers and tiny alcoves, lies the medieval toilet. Or, as they like to call it, the garderobe. Romantic, isn't it? Maybe you can almost smell it. Damp wood, old straw, something slightly sour in the air. Don't wrinkle your nose just yet. We've only just begun. So settle in. Let your mind drift. No rush. No need to hold anything in, pun intended. Just let your breathing slow down while I whisper these murky, mucky little secrets of the past. It's going to be quite a ride. And don't worry, none of this smell is real tonight. It's just us safe in our beds with pillows and blankets that smell fresh and clean. So close your eyes if you like. Let the shadows of stone castles and bustling medieval streets appear behind your eyelids. And thank you. Thank you for trusting me to bring you to this stinky corner of history. Ready? Let's step carefully. Watch your shoes. And off we go. Imagine waking up in a castle centuries ago. Not the fairy tale version with silk sheets and crackling fireplaces at every turn, but the real thing. Picture it. Thick stone walls that never quite hold back the damp chill. Drafty windows where the wind slips through like a nosy ghost and rushes on the floor that do little to keep your feet warm. You're curled up on a simple straw mattress, wrapped tight in a coarse wool blanket. Maybe you dreamt of feasts and dancing, or perhaps you heard the soft creak of floorboards in the night. The castle always whispers, always creaks, but then it hits you. That subtle, undeniable urge. The call of nature that neither king nor servant can ignore. So you peel yourself away from the warmth. Your feet touch the cold, uneven floor, and you shiver. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and hold the stub of a candle up to the darkness. The flame flickers as the wind teases it, shadows stretching up the stone walls like thin, bony fingers. The draft feels alive in this old place, always watching, always sighing. Now comes the real charm of medieval convenience. No tiled bathroom waiting for you with polished brass taps and fresh towels. No steaming shower to greet you. Instead, you make your way down a narrow passage, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the hollow corridors. Somewhere in the distance you might hear a guard cough or the clatter of hooves in the courtyard below, but otherwise, it's just you and your candle and that steady, growing pressure in your belly. Finally, you reach it, the garderobe, a fancy word for a small stone closet protruding precariously from the castle wall. You push open the heavy wooden door, the hinges groaning in protest. The smell meets you first, a mixture of cold air and, well, exactly what you'd expect when human waste has nowhere to go but down. You step inside, careful not to slip on the damp floor. The air is colder here. An icy draft snakes up through the hole in the stone bench, brushing your skin in places you'd really rather it didn't. You glance down. There's nothing but darkness. Somewhere below, maybe 20 or 30 feet, your waste will tumble into the moat or a cesspit that waits patiently, collecting its gruesome bounty. And here's the unsettling part. You better hope no one is down there. Servants and castle workers sometimes found themselves beneath these chutes, cleaning or drawing water. A poorly timed visit could mean a very unpleasant surprise. Accidents happened. Stories whisper of soldiers besieging a castle, sneaking up its outer walls, only to find themselves showered with things far less noble than arrows. So there you sit, in your chilly stone chamber, try not to think about the black void below. There's no toilet paper, of course, maybe some straw, a rag, or a handful of moss if you're lucky. You shiver again, adjusting your cloak to keep it from brushing the floor. The wind whistles through tiny cracks in the stone. You can almost hear the world outside, the distant rustle of trees, the murmur of the river beyond the moat, the soft snort of a horse in the stables. And when you're done, while you stand, brush off what you can, and step back into the passageway, the smell clinging faintly to your clothes. The warmth of your bed calls to you, but you can't help but feel a small, grateful twinge for the modern bathroom you'll use centuries later. So next time you flush a toilet in the middle of the night, think of that lonely figure hunched over a stone bench, high above the castle grounds. Try not to lean too far forward, hoping the wind stays calm and the floor doesn't crumble. Sleepy yet? Don't drift off just yet. There's plenty more filth and fascination where this came from. But for now, imagine the echo of your footsteps retreating down that corridor, candle flickering, eyes drooping with sleep, grateful you only had to visit the garderobe once tonight. Let's slip quietly out of that damp castle and wander down the hill to a small village. The air changes here. The stone gives way to thatched roofs and timber frames, the kind of crooked cottages you might imagine from old storybooks. Except there's no sugarcoating this part. The air carries the sour tang of livestock, muddy pathways, and something else you can't quite ignore. Picture this: a simple peasant's cottage, its walls stuffed with straw and clay to keep out the worst of the wind, though a winter draft always finds its way in anyway. Inside, it's one room for everything: eating, sleeping, working, and of course relieving yourself. Imagine waking up before dawn. It's bitter cold outside. Frost webs the tiny window, and you can see your breath even under the blanket. You roll over on your straw mattress, bones aching from yesterday's work in the fields. And there it is again, the familiar nudge from your bladder. The urge that cares nothing for frost or darkness. Now, there's no garderobe here, no clever stone chute leading down into the moat. Instead, tucked beneath a rough-hewn bed is the humblest of medieval innovations, the chamber pot. A simple ceramic or wooden bowl, maybe with a cracked rim and the faint smell of last night's use. No torchlit corridor to walk. No stone bench perched dangerously above the courtyard. Just you, the chamber pot, and maybe your snoring family nearby, none the wiser. You shift the blanket, sit up carefully so the straw doesn't rustle too loudly, and do your business right there in the flickering shadows. Maybe you hear the rooster crow outside. Maybe you hear the soft shuffle of mice in the walls. Tiny creatures that thrive in the warmth and the scraps you leave behind. When you're done, you slide the pot back under the bed. There's no flush, no sweet-smelling soap waiting by a porcelain sink. The smell settles into the corners of the room, mixing with the scents of wood smoke, sweat, wet wool, and something earthy that never quite leaves. And in the morning, well, the ritual continues. Imagine a woman in a patched wool dress, a mother, a daughter, wrapping a shawl tight around her shoulders as she lifts the heavy pot carefully. The contents slosh unpleasantly as she ducks through the low doorway, stepping into the biting dawn. Now, here comes the charming part. There are no sewage pipes, no tidy bins. Instead, she carries it to the tiny window that opens out onto the street. A street already slick with mud, manure, and the runoff of countless other chamber pots. She leans out, calls a single warning that echoes down the lane. Gardez-vous, a borrowed phrase from the French, prenez garde à l'eau. Watch out for the water. A polite gesture, really. A moment later, a splash. The night's waste joins the mix of refuse and rain that trickles through the gutters. Picture the street below, crooked cobblestones, ruts deep enough to catch a wheel or an unsuspecting boot. Dogs nose through the muck for scraps. Pigs root around for anything edible. Children run barefoot, squealing in the morning mist, oblivious to what squishes under their toes. The smell clings to their clothes, their hair, their games. It wafts up between the houses, settling in the thatch and beams, a constant presence that everyone accepts as simply life. Back inside, the pot goes back under the bed, ready for another night. No bleach, no disinfectant wipes. Maybe a quick rinse at the village well, if you're feeling proper. But who's to judge? Everyone's in the same boat, or should we say the same pot. So next time you toss aside your blankets to visit your warm bathroom with its soft toilet paper and polite flush, remember that peasant family, crouched over a simple bowl in the freezing dark. No marble tiles, no bubbles of scented soap. Just practicality and routine. Nature's call, medieval style. And yet, somehow, they carried on, living, laughing, falling in love, raising babies in that same single room where they slept, ate, and, well, did everything else. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much do we take for granted now? The little luxuries we barely notice as we drift off to sleep. So, pull that blanket a bit tighter around you. Listen to the wind outside your window. It's cleaner than any medieval street ever was. You're safe, warm, and no one's about to dump a chamber pot out your window tonight. Dream of simpler times. Just don't dream too vividly about where the waste went next. We'll get there soon enough. Meanwhile, let's stay a while on those medieval streets. Picture them as dawn stretches her gray fingers across the crooked rooftops. The air is damp, heavy with fog, but not the sweet kind that makes you want to take a deep breath. No, this fog carries with it a sour, earthy perfume. The pungent perfume of life lived out in the open, where waste, rainwater, and human existence swirl together in a sloppy, unavoidable soup. Close your eyes. Can you hear it? The muffled clatter of iron shod hooves on cobblestones slick with last night's rain. Or was it last night's chamber pots? A cart rattles by, its wheels splashing through the muck that pools in the dips and cracks of the street. You might hear the soft grunt of pigs snuffling through the refuse. Tiny snouts rooting through piles of straw and scraps for a bite of something rotten but filling. Dogs bark and fight over a crust of bread that fell from someone's pocket. Cats, half wild and sharp-eyed, stalk the gutters for a rat fattened on the same unspeakable banquet. In the distance, a door creaks open. You hear the faint voice of a woman leaning from an upper window. A sleepy shout. Gardez-vous. A heartbeat later, a splash below. Someone curses, mutters a few choice words under their breath, and wipes a fleck of filth from the corner of their eye. This is the smell that lives in every seam of your cloak, every fold of your bonnet. It curls into your hair, works its way under your fingernails, lingers on the wool that lines your sleeves. No matter how carefully you step, the street finds you. It sticks to your shoes, your stockings, the hem of your tunic. Even the fine folks, the merchant's wife with her fur-trimmed cloak, the priest with his heavy robes, they're not spared. The smell rides with them into churches and guild halls, dances behind them down narrow alleys. Picture a row of crooked houses leaning so close together that neighbors could pass gossip, or a steaming bucket from window to window. Open drains run alongside the buildings, carrying a sluggish trickle of waste toward the river, if you're lucky. When it rains, and it often rains, these drains swell and overflow, carrying yesterday's filth back into your doorstep. Children, with no boots and no sense, splash through the puddles, their giggles echoing off the timber frames. You can almost see their bare feet kicking up tiny arcs of muddy water, unaware of the invisible dangers that swirl with every step. But here's something oddly human about it. In this grimy tangle of waste and mud, life hums along. Market stalls bloom like crooked flowers. Bakers carry warm loaves fresh from wood-fired ovens, the yeasty aroma fighting bravely against the street's sour stench. Fishmongers slap yesterday's catch onto wet wooden boards, scales glittering dull in the pale sun. Amid the clamor of traders and beggars, the smell of roasting meat, onions sizzling in lard, mingles with the sharper, less polite notes wafting from the gutters. And you, a humble townsfolk, let's say, pick your way through this mess with practiced grace. You keep your head down when you hear the telltale creak of an upstairs shutter, because you know what comes next. Maybe you tug your cap tighter around your ears. Maybe you mutter your own half-hearted Gardy-Loo in solidarity. It's a dance, a daily routine. Yet, the street is more than just a river of waste. It's where you meet neighbors, barter for bread, catch snippets of scandal whispered at the well. It's the stage where barefoot children play stickball, dodging carts and horses, and the odd chicken that escapes its coop. It's where a boy might catch a girl's eye just for a heartbeat before the stink and the chores and the day swallow them both back up. No one escapes the smell, but no one is truly alone in it either. There's a strange, grim camaraderie in the way people share the filth. The street unites them. Highborn or low, they breathe the same air. They wash their boots in the same muddy ruts. They lift their cloaks when the rain comes, hoping for just a moment of clean water to rinse away the worst of yesterday. So, while you're nestled under your fresh sheets tonight, your windows closed, the soft hum of your modern plumbing hidden behind the walls, spare a moment for these people. For the father hurrying his children along the slippery lane, careful to steer them away from the deepest puddles. For the young maid shaking her head in disgust as she scrubs her doorstep clean, only to see the next wave of waste trickle right back. For the old man sitting by his window, watching the world shuffle by, the smell so familiar it hardly registers anymore. Strange to think, isn't it, how ordinary it was to live every day ankle deep in what we'd flush away without a second thought. How they laughed and loved and argued and dreamed all the same. Pigs rooting at their feet, chamber pots flying overhead. So keep breathing softly now. You're safe. Your street outside smells of wet asphalt or fresh grass, not chamber pots and pigs. And if you ever feel tempted to complain about traffic or a bit of city grime, remember these medieval streets and the stubborn life that carried on through every splash and every squelch. But here's the curious part. Even in a world devoted to silence and prayer, the business of waste was never far away. Imagine it. A stone monastery perched on a gentle hill, its cloisters wrapped around a quiet courtyard where herbs grow in tidy beds and sparrows nest under ancient eaves. The bell tolls at dawn, echoing through corridors where monks shuffle on sandaled feet, robes brushing the flagstones in soft, measured steps. The monastery is a place of ritual, prayers at sunrise, chants at dusk, hours bent over ancient manuscripts by candlelight. But the body remains stubbornly, humbly human, No amount of Latin psalms can quiet the belly forever. Picture a restorative. That's the polite name they gave to the communal latrine. It's usually tucked at the far end of the dormitory, a long stone building that hums at night with the snores of dozens of men devoted to God. The restorative might jut out over a small stream, water trickling beneath the floor to carry away whatever the monks left behind. A clever bit of medieval engineering, primitive plumbing that seems almost modern if you squint just right. Now, slip inside with me. It's dim, of course. The only light seeps in through narrow slits in the stone, casting a watery glow on the cold benches. Imagine a row of simple holes cut into long wooden planks, polished smooth by centuries of use. No cubicles, no walls, no doors to close you off from your brothers in faith. Just a line of robed figures side by side, heads bowed in quiet thought, or perhaps not so quiet if last night's gruel didn't sit well. There's something both comical and tender about it. The same men who chant solemnly in the chapel now gather here, robes hitched up, sandals perched on damp stone, all equal in this moment of earthly need. They might whisper a prayer under their breath, or they might talk softly about the garden, the weather, or a passage from the Psalms they're trying to memorize. And the smell, well, it never truly leaves. Imagine the sour trace of ammonia, the dampness of old stone that never quite dries, the faint herbal sweetness from the rushes or sprigs of lavender, sometimes scattered about to combat the stench. It helps a little, but mostly the smell clings to the walls, soaks into the robes, follows the monks back to their dormitory. Picture Brother Thomas. Let's give him a name. An aging monk with a gentle stoop in his shoulders and ink stains on his fingers from hours spent copying texts. He shuffles into the restorative before matins, lantern flickering in his hand. He sits, sighs softly, and gazes out through the narrow slit of a window. Maybe he watches the dawn slip its pink fingers over the fields beyond. Maybe he thinks about the garden that needs weeding or the new manuscript waiting on his desk. In this small, unremarkable moment, life is strangely peaceful. A reminder that no matter how lofty the prayers, the body is never quite done with its demands. Sometimes the restorative stream would clog. Imagine the poor lay brothers tasked with clearing the blockage, wading into cold, brackish water, armed with long poles to poke free the tangles of waste and debris. A job for the humble, but one that kept the monastery from drowning in its own filth. They called it sanitas, cleanliness, but it was far from the sparkling tile and sweet soap we know now. Yet for all its smells and stains, the restorative was part of the rhythm of the monastery, an unspoken bond that tied the brothers together, reminding them of their shared humanity. When they stood shoulder to shoulder in the chapel, robes clean once more, voices raised in ancient hymns, you'd never guess they'd been elbow to elbow only hours before, perched on cold stone, offering their waste to the stream below. So next time you picture monks in hushed candlelit libraries, quills scratching parchment under vaulted ceilings, remember Brother Thomas, too. Sitting in the dawn's chill, cloak pulled tight around his knees, thinking of God and gardens and the next meal, while the water trickled beneath him, carrying the monastery's secrets away to the river. Strange how even holiness has its earthy side, isn't it? And perhaps strangely comforting, too. The reminder that we're all bound to the same needs, no matter how high our minds might soar. So breathe in your clean sheets, the scent of your pillow, the hush of your room. Let the restorative drift away into the shadows of your dreams. The soft echoes of monks at dawn fading gently as you sink deeper into the night. Imagine the hush of a medieval castle at night. The feast is over. The long trestle tables wiped down with stale ale and ragged cloths. Servants doze near the hearth, and somewhere above, a lone guard paces the ramparts, boots crunching on frost. And inside these cold walls, tucked away like a secret, sits the humble garderobe, the castle's lavatory, if you can call it that. Picture a narrow corridor, so tight you brush your elbows against the cold stones on either side. Your candle flame shivers every time you breathe too close. You reach the garderobe door, a thick plank of ancient oak, its iron latch rusted from centuries of damp air drifting in and out. You lift the latch. It scrapes open with a reluctant groan that echoes through the corridor like an old ghost clearing its throat. Step inside. There's not much to see, just a small stone chamber barely wide enough to stretch your arms. A simple stone or wooden bench lines one wall, a single hole cut through its center like a crude window into the darkness below. This is the royal chamber's royal chamber, so to speak. And here's where it gets oddly fascinating. The garderobe juts out from the castle wall like a stony balcony no one would ever want to stand under. The waist drops straight down, sometimes into a pit, sometimes into the moat that encircles the fortress like a watery, stinking defense system. Some castles even had chutes built right into the walls, sloping steeply so that the unspeakable could slide away from the foundations. In theory, at least. But theory doesn't always match reality, does it? Imagine a bitter winter night. The wind howls around the castle's ramparts. Snowflakes whip against the garderobe's tiny window, if you're lucky enough to have one, and a cold draft slips up through that yawning hole beneath you. You feel it brush your thighs, your belly, your back. You shudder and pull your cloak tighter. Try not to think about what you're balancing above. If you were a lord or a lady, maybe you had a padded seat, a sprig of lavender tucked under the bench to fight the stink. But more often than not, it was just hard stone and the ever-present smell that crept back up through the chute, no matter how cleverly the mason angled the drop. There's an intimacy to it, isn't there? Even kings couldn't escape this simple moment of human humility. Perched on cold stone, eyes fixed on the flickering candle wedged into a niche on the wall. Some might pray, some might plot, some might wonder what their enemies were up to out beyond the walls. Speaking of enemies, the garderobe had an unexpected role in the brutal chess game of medieval warfare. Picture a siege, ladders scraping against the stone, ropes swinging in the dark. An enemy soldier clings to the outer wall, dagger clenched between his teeth, eyes scanning for a handhold. And then, unlucky soul, he finds the drainage chute from the Lord's private garderobe. A stream of filth and cold waste trickling down, right where he's about to place his foot. A misstep, a slip, and down he tumbles into the muddy moat, cursing the day he ever thought castle walls were only defended by swords and boiling oil. Meanwhile, inside life carried on. Servants might scurry up and down narrow stairs to clean out waste pits when they didn't overflow and leak in his cellars, that is. Rats nested in the warm crevices of the chutes, living off scraps tossed carelessly aside. And the smell? Oh, the smell was a stubborn guest, seeping into the castle's great halls, drifting up spiral staircases, settling into tapestries no matter how finely woven. Yet, for all its filth, the garderobe was something people were oddly proud of. To have a garderobe meant status. You had stone walls, a moat, a roof overhead, and a dedicated place for doing what all humans must do. Better than squatting in a field or sharing the crowded stench of the street. And some of these garderobes were surprisingly advanced for their time. Chutes lined with stone to prevent erosion. Vents carved into walls to catch a breeze and pull the stink away. Moats diverted to act as a primitive flush. Ingenious, if imperfect. So next time you light a candle to read in bed, picture a medieval noble doing the same. Perched above the castle wall, candle trembling in the draft, eyes on the blackness below. Maybe he hears the hoot of an owl or the distant hiss of a fox near the moat. Maybe he wonders if tomorrow's siege will come, if the stones will hold, if the waste will keep flowing out instead of in. A castle's strength wasn't just in its battlements or its brave knights, but in these hidden corners where the body demanded its simple dues. In a world of intrigue and ambition, the garderobe was a reminder that everyone, from king to kitchen maid, shared this earthy bond. So pull your blanket tighter, breathe in the clean hush of your room. No drafts tonight, no rats waiting under the floorboards, no icy wind sneaking up where it shouldn't. Just you, safe and warm, floating far above those ancient stone chutes, a quiet witness to the humble, hilarious, horrifying truth that made castles human. Let's stay with the castle garderobe for a while longer. You see, this innocent little toilet closet wasn't just an architectural necessity. It was an unexpected player in the bloody game of siege warfare. Imagine the hush before dawn, the thick fog clinging to the outer wall of a fortress that survived 100 winters. The air smells of damp moss, iron, and the faint sour tang of waste that always seeps through cracks in the stone. Far below, a ragged band of soldiers creeps through the moat, careful not to splash too loudly. They're desperate, cold, their breath little clouds in the dark. One by one, they press themselves flat against the castle's outer wall, eyes squinting up into the shadows above. Somewhere up there, beyond arrow slits and ramparts, is a narrow drainage chute carved centuries ago by a clever mason. To us, it's just an unremarkable crack in the stone. But to a daring invader, that chute is a secret passage, a hidden vein that bypasses the drawbridge and portcullis and armored guards above. It's just wide enough for a thin man to squeeze through if he's brave enough or foolish enough to climb inside. Picture this: a young foot soldier, no more than 20, roped up with makeshift harnesses. He wipes sweat from his brow, even though the air is icy. He braces his boots against the rough stone, heart pounding as he tests his weight. The iron hook bites into the edge of the garderobe's drainage hole, a small miracle that centuries of filth and frost haven't crumbled it away. Above him, a flicker of torchlight. Somewhere, a guard coughs, oblivious to the intruder inching his way up the wall in the dark. The soldier grips the rope tight, pulls himself upward, inch by inch. He tries not to think too hard about what's trickling down the stone beneath his palms. Then, the moment that makes you wince and grin at the same time. A soft splash, a sudden warmth on his face. He pauses, dazed by what's just fallen on him. Up above, in the garderobe chamber, a bleary-eyed lord finishes his midnight visit. He tucks his robe back around his shoulders, oblivious to the unlucky soul clinging to the chute outside. The poor climber spits, wipes his cheek, tries not to gag. He knows he can't stop now. His men wait below, breathless, hoping he'll unlatch a door or throw down a rope so they can swarm inside before the sun rises. But the castle has other plans. Maybe the stone is slick with more than rain. Maybe the angle is wrong. Maybe his fingers slip on a bit of moss or something far worse. In one terrible moment, he loses his grip. He twists, clawing at the stone. The rope jerks free, and he tumbles backward. The splash as he hits the moat is followed by a shout, then silence. His men scatter like rats, chased off by a single, humiliating accident. It wasn't just accidents either. Some defenders were clever and merciless. Legends swirl about sieges where waste was used as a deliberate weapon. When boiling oil or tar was scarce, the garrison might gather every bucket of filth they could muster. They'd stand at the ramparts, waiting for the enemy to breach the outer walls, and then, With perfect, disgusting timing, they dump the steaming contents on the heads below. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? But in an age when infection was deadlier than any blade, a splash of human waste was more than just an insult. Open wounds, raw skin scraped by rope and stone, they'd fester and rot in days, long before an enemy ever reached the keep. And so, the humble garderobe, that tiny closet of cold stone and creaking hinges, became part of the castle's hidden defense system, a way to keep enemies at bay with the most humiliating weapon imaginable. A practical lesson in the hierarchy of needs. Before you conquer the throne room, you'd better survive the toilets. Meanwhile, inside the walls, life rolled on. Servants still scurried up spiral staircases with fresh rushes to scatter on garderobe floors. Maids brushed the stone seats with handfuls of lavender or mint, a futile fight against the stink that always won in the end. Lords and ladies sat perched on their cold benches, gossiping about court intrigue, half listening for the telltale scrape of boots on stone far below. And when the siege was over, when the ladders were pulled away and the moat lay still again, the garderobe returned to its mundane routine. Just a quiet chamber, a hole in the wall, a place where lords were reminded that even they could be humbled by a trickle of cold wind from below. So, as you nestle deeper into your blankets tonight, picture the wind curling through those old chutes, whispering secrets from one chamber to another. Imagine the unlucky soldier dangling in the dark, his dreams of glory washed away by a perfectly timed flush of medieval filth. And feel that soft, smug gratitude for your bathroom down the hall. Clean, warm, flushable, and wonderfully, blissfully free of sieges. Rest easy. The only drafts here tonight are the gentle sighs of sleep. The only walls are your 4 safe ones. And no one, not a soul, is perched above you with a chamber pot, waiting for the perfect moment to remind you who really defends the castle. Meanwhile, leave behind the castle walls and the unlucky soldiers scrambling up garderobe chutes. Follow the winding dirt road through open fields until the squat shapes of timbered buildings come into view, chimneys already puffing pale, smoke into the dawn. The medieval town is awake, even before the sun fully clears the horizon. Chickens scratching at doorsteps, market stalls creaking open, the first shouts of traders echoing off crooked beams. And somewhere in the midst of this noisy tangle sits the town's humble answer to sanitation, the public latrine. A place so basic, so necessary, and yet so exposed. Imagine it now. Not a row of tidy stalls with locks and scented soap, but a simple wooden shack, or sometimes just a stone room tucked beside a guild hall or market square. One door, if you were lucky enough to find one that closed. Step closer with me. Smell the mix of stale urine, damp straw scattered half-heartedly on the floor, and the sharp tang of ammonia that bites the back of your throat. A few crooked benches run along the wall, each with a round hole cut neatly into the planks. And that's it. No partitions, no barriers, no polite notion of privacy. You come here to sit shoulder to shoulder with your neighbors, your baker, your blacksmith, even the local drunk who sings off-key as he squats beside you. Picture this. A young apprentice, maybe 15, freckled cheeks red with cold. He's perched on the end of the bench, shifting awkwardly as his master leans in a chat about the day's orders. No one looks each other in the eye for too long. There's a delicate balance between pretending you're alone and not pretending at all. The air is filled with the small sounds we never talk about. The splash of water far below, the grunt of effort, the polite cough to cover a more impolite noise. And beneath it all, a pit yawns in the darkness. Sometimes it's lined with stone, sometimes just raw earth where centuries of waste fester in the damp. In theory, there's a stream to wash things away, but streams clog, water slows, and then the pit becomes a sour, bloated stew waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to clean it out. Gong farmers, they called them. Men who climbed down with shovels and buckets, scooping out the thick, half-liquid sludge. Some towns paid them in coin, others in ale or bread. One can only imagine the smell that clung to them long after the job was done. Public latrines were more than just a place to answer nature's call. They were a place to gossip, to catch up on news. Picture the chatter, who bought a new cloak, who owes whom for a sack of barley, who's been seen slipping out the back door of the tanner's shop at dusk. Secrets traded over the worst smell you can imagine, perhaps that made them feel safer, buried under layers of filth no one cared to dig through. And the flies, oh the flies, buzzing lazily from one bench to another, drunk on the warmth and the endless feast laid out for them. They'd follow you home, settle on your bread, land on your face as you slept. No one escaped them. They were tiny messengers, carrying reminders of the pit into every hearth and hallway. Sometimes when the pits overflowed, and they always did, eventually the streets outside would join the performance. Imagine a sudden rainstorm, the gutters clogged with straw and muck, waste seeping up through cracks in the paving stones. Shoes ruined, hems stained, boots splashing through puddles that weren't just rain. But still, the people came back. Where else could they go? A bucket behind the door was for nighttime emergencies. A field behind the house was fine if you lived on the edge of town. But in the crowded maze of narrow alleys, you needed a place to do what everyone must do. And so the latrine became a strange stage for the everyday drama of medieval life. Young and old, rich and poor. Here, everyone was stripped back to the same needs. For a few minutes, no one cared about your status or your wealth or your debts. You were just another body on a bench, staring at the cracked plaster wall, willing the moment to pass so you could step back out into the bracing air. If you listen closely now, you can almost hear the echo of laughter, a shared joke over the smell, a teasing shove from one friend to another, the creak of the bench as someone stands, tugging their tunic down with a sigh of relief. Life carried on, even here, perhaps especially here. So breathe in the sweet stillness of your own room tonight. Think of your locked bathroom door, the soft hum of a fan, the candle flickering on the edge of your bathtub. Think of how no one sits beside you, elbows brushing, knees knocking flies circling your head. Your business is your own, private and unremarkable. And if the thought makes you smile, let it linger. Hold it close as you drift off, knowing that once upon a time, in a cold, cramped corner of a muddy town, this most basic of acts was done in the company of strangers, shoulder to shoulder, secrets whispered, laughter echoing softly above the stink. A small, humble reminder that humanity has always been a little messy, and wonderfully so. Let's wander into a medieval inn now, just off the main road, where merchants, pilgrims, and thieves alike stop to rest their weary bones. Imagine pushing open the heavy timber door, your shoulders brushing the rough lintel worn smooth by generations of cloaks and capes. Inside, the air is a swirl of warmth and noise, the hiss of a hearth fire, the low buzz of drunken voices, the scrape of a lute in the corner playing a tune that's older than the beams overhead. You find your corner. A mug of ale is pressed into your hands, warm, a little sour. You drink it anyway. The taste of the road is worse. And above you, up a crooked staircase that groans under your boots, waits your bed for the night. Not a feather mattress, not a clean linen sheet. Just a low wooden frame stuffed with straw and maybe, if you're lucky, a thin blanket that smells faintly of the last few travelers who used it. But here's the part you might not think about. The moment you blow out your candle and sink down into that scratchy nest of straw, pulling your cloak tighter around your shoulders to keep out the night's chill, That inevitable stirring in your belly reminds you that no matter how weary you are, nature cares nothing for your dreams of sleep. You reach under the bed with cold fingers, feeling around for the shape of a simple ceramic bowl, the chamber pot. A humble little thing, sometimes chipped, sometimes cracked, but it spares you the stumble down icy stairs and the muddy courtyard in the pitch-black dark. In a world without flush toilets, the chamber pot is as loyal a companion as any sturdy horse. Picture this. The room around you is not quite silent. You can hear someone snoring through the thin wall, a deep, rattling sound that rises and falls like waves against the bow of a creaking ship. A mouse rustles in the straw near the hearth downstairs, emboldened by the crumbs left behind by careless guests. Somewhere down the corridor, a door creaks open. A groggy pilgrim steps out to the landing to spit the last of his ale into the gutter outside. Meanwhile, you shift your blanket, your shoulders hunched against the chill. Try not to knock over the candle stump flickering on the floorboards beside you. You balance carefully over the chamber pot, the rough rim pressing cold against your thighs, the faint smell of last night's traveler clinging to it no matter how many times the innkeeper's wife rinsed it with the well water outside. And then, when you're done, there's that awkward moment, the small scrape as you slide the pot back under the bed, hoping it doesn't tip over and leave a sour puddle under the straw. You tug your blanket up to your chin, breathing in the faint musk of smoke, sweat, and damp wool that clings to every rafter in the inn. But the ritual doesn't end there. Come dawn, the innkeeper's boy, 12, maybe 13, will shuffle from room to room, barefoot on the cold floorboards. He'll stoop to collect the chamber pots, one by one, careful not to spill a drop. He might wrinkle his nose or whistle a tune to keep the smell at bay. Then he'll stagger out into the back alley, where the waste joins the rest of the town's fragrant river. No pipes, no sewers, just a narrow gutter running down the middle of the lane, where yesterday's dinner, tomorrow's sickness, and last night's ale all mingle freely. A pig roots through it for scraps. A stray dog laps at the trickle, wagging its tail at passers-by. The same water might end up in someone's cooking pot by evening, boiled and blessed, and believed safe enough for supper. Yet, within these cramped, smoky walls, travelers found warmth. They swapped tales by the hearth, stories of bandits in the forest, rumors of plague in the next shire, whispers of distant wars and kings who cared little for the common man's struggle with chamber pots and chambermaids. The inn was a refuge, humble but dependable. A roof overhead, a bowl of stew, a straw mattress to cradle your aching bones. And beneath it all, tucked into the shadows, the chamber pot waited. A reminder that even as we dream of adventure, our bodies tether us to the most mundane needs. An old joke says that every knight was only as mighty as his weakest bladder. And in the dark, chilly corners of medieval inns, that truth was on display every single night. So next time you wander into your bathroom at 2 in the morning, half asleep, lights humming softly overhead, think of the countless weary travelers who crouched in the dark over a simple clay bowl, hoping they didn't tip it over before drifting back into a restless sleep. Pull your blanket tighter now. Listen to the quiet hum of the night around you. No footsteps in the corridor. No chamber pots to empty at dawn. Just you, safe, clean, dreaming of roads you'll never have to walk barefoot and straw beds you'll never have to share with mice. Sleep well, knowing that even the simplest comforts, warm water, a flush, a door that closes tight, are little luxuries won by centuries of trial and error, filth and grit, and the endless, unglamorous work of people you'll never know. Imagine the first light of dawn creeping over the rooftops, the soft pink glow caught on the tips of crooked chimneys and sagging thatch. The night's final embers die in hearths behind shuttered windows, and the town begins its quiet ritual. The ritual of emptying out what no one wants to keep. Picture the innkeeper's wife, shoulders wrapped in a heavy wool shawl, hair pinned hastily beneath a linen cap. She moves from room to room, collecting the chamber pots, each one brimming with the night's confessions. Her footsteps creak across the floorboards as she balances them carefully, lips pressed into a thin line against the sour steam that rises with each step. She's done this for years, long enough that the smell hardly makes her flinch. Now, see her at the window. She props open the small wooden shutter, its hinges squealing in protest. The air outside is damp and chill, fresh only by comparison. Somewhere below, the first few souls shuffle down the narrow lane. A young boy driving a squealing pig to market. A baker's apprentice trotting with a basket of hard rolls strapped to his back. A milkmaid yawning so wide her jaw cracks in the cold. Above them, the innkeeper's wife leans out, squinting down into the dim street. She draws a deep breath, not because she wants to, but because she must, and then she calls out the warning that has echoed through these alleys for generations. Gardy-loo. It's a strange, almost musical shout, borrowed from the French Prenez garde à l'eau, which means beware of the water, but everyone knows it isn't water at all. It's an alarm, a polite mercy in an impolite world. A heartbeat later, she tips the pot. A splash, a splatter, the faint, sickening smack as the waste hits the cobblestones below. Maybe the boy jumps aside, just in time, his pig squealing in protest. Maybe a splash lands on a boot, or worse, a stockinged ankle. A small, daily indignity that no one escapes forever. Now, imagine the street as the morning rolls on. More shutters creak open. More voices echo down the narrow passageways. Each shout of Gardy-loo, followed by a sloppy downpour of last night's meals and cheap ale and whatever else the townsfolk could not bear to keep inside. It pools in shallow ruts worn deep by cartwheels and centuries of footsteps. It soaks the straw meant to keep the mud at bay, turns it into a pulpy, foul-smelling mush. Step carefully now, if you're brave enough to follow along. Picture the clogs on your feet, thick wooden soles meant to keep you an inch or two above the worst of it. Each step squelches. Dogs dart from doorway to doorway, sniffing for scraps. Rats, plump from an endless buffet, scurry along the shadows, whiskers twitching. The smell lingers on your hem, your stockings, the frayed edges of your cloak. There's no escaping it. It follows you home, clings to the rough wool of your tunic, settles into your hair no matter how hard you scrub. Yet, life hums along, indifferent to the stench. Traders spread their wares across wooden stalls, arranging rough cloth, pewter mugs, wheels of hard cheese that must be kept out of the gutter's reach. Housewives lean out of doorways, baskets propped on hips, swapping gossip about who's sick, who's expecting, who was seen slipping out of the alehouse after curfew. A town crier appears, ringing a handbell and calling out the day's proclamations over the background chorus of slops hitting the street. And beneath their feet, beneath all that noise and barter and bustle, the waste trickles along, guided by crude gutters that split and fork like veins across the town. If the rain comes, it's a blessing and a curse. It washes some of it away, but it churns the rest into a brown slurry that flows straight to the river. The same river that might fill your cooking pot tonight. Think about it. The same water that carries away your filth carries back your next meal. Some townsfolk believe a quick boil purifies it. Others toss a sprig of rosemary into the pot, convinced that a good, strong herb can drive away the invisible demons that lurk in foul water. And maybe it does, or maybe they just tell themselves that so they can sleep a little easier. But no matter how grim it sounds to us now, for them, it was simply life. An unremarkable fact, as steady and familiar as the sound of hooves on cobblestones or the church bells calling them to morning prayers. And so, each dawn, the windows open, the pots tip, the cries of "Guardy Lou" drift through the waking air, part caution, part chorus, part grim joke that everyone understands. So tonight, as you lie in the hush of your room, door shut tight, pipes hidden behind clean walls, think of that innkeeper's wife leaning out the window at dawn, the chill numbing her fingers, her voice rising in a practiced shout. Think of the young boy dodging the splash, the pig squealing, the muddy street swallowing yesterday's secrets while life carries on above it all. And feel that quiet, secret gratitude for every drain that carries your worries away with a single flush. No warning cry needed, no pig to dodge, no stocking to scrub clean in cold water by the light of a flickering candle. Rest easy then. The windows here stay shut tonight. The street outside is dry. The only echoes are your own breath and the slow drift of your mind toward dreams that, thankfully, smell only of linen and warmth. Picture the fields just outside the town walls. Wide open meadows that all year sit quiet under the sun and rain, watching the seasons will pass like a patient old farmer. But when festival day comes, these fields come alive with a rush of color, noise, and smells you'll never quite forget. Imagine it, a harvest fair, the biggest of the year. Tents bloom like wildflowers overnight. Striped canvas in red and yellow, snapping in the breeze. Merchants hammer stakes in the soft earth, setting up stalls that groan under wheels of cheese, bolts of rough cloth, bundles of dried herbs, and pottery that will chip before winter's end. Somewhere in the chaos, a wandering juggler tosses flaming torches toward the gray sky, while children shriek with laughter, darting between legs and carts and barrels. Now breathe in the air. It's a muddle of scents, roasted meat sizzling on spits, the sweet, heady perfume of ale sloshing from clay mugs, the sour note of sweat as bodies press together, jostling for the best view of the mummers dancing on a makeshift stage. And, weaving through it all, that more earthy, stubborn smell you can never quite ignore. Because when thousands gather in an open field with no pipes or drains, the field itself becomes the toilet. There are no tidy rows of stalls here, no men, and women's signs nailed to wooden doors. Just the vastness of nature and the hush of your own humility. Picture a trader from 3 villages over, slipping behind a hedgerow at dawn. He glances over his shoulder, hoping no neighbor or rival spots him with his breeches hitched around his knees, squatting in the dew-wet grass. A goose wanders too close, honking in alarm before it flaps away in search of safer pasture. A mother squats at the edge of the trampled fairground, a baby propped on her hip. She shields her eyes from the rising sun, scanning for anyone who might wander too close. Her older children play in the mud just a few paces away, blissfully unaware that the patch they're stomping in is part playground, part privy. By midday, the field is a tapestry of hidden droppings, small, foul gifts left behind by hundreds of souls who simply couldn't hold it any longer. Straw is scattered in handfuls here and there, a feeble effort to soak up the worst of it. But the straw turns to pulp under the weight of 1,000 boots, mixing with spilled ale and horse dung and the scraps tossed carelessly from plates. If the clouds break open, and they often do, the whole fair becomes a slick dance of mud and filth, a slow stew that seeps into the hems of tunics and the folds of leather boots. There's no escaping it. By dusk, every footstep squelches, every gust of wind carries a whiff of something that makes you tug your scarf tighter across your nose. Yet life hums on. The minstrels play their flutes and drums while the people sway, tankards raised high. Laughter bubbles up in the face of the stink, because what else can you do? No one comes to a fair expecting to stay clean. It's a price they gladly pay for the chance to dance on the muddy earth, to feel the glow of ale warming their bellies, to kiss a sweetheart behind the hay bales when the moon climbs high. Imagine the gossip that passes around the bonfire at night. Who stumbled into a bad patch behind the tent? Who lost a boot to the hungry mud? Who was seen slipping away from the alehouse with flushed cheeks and a half-tied cloak? These stories drift up with the sparks into the dark sky, joining the countless others whispered at harvest fairs since the first village dared to gather under the stars. And come morning, when the last embers die and the tents are folded away, the field remains, trampled flat, littered with scraps of cloth and broken mugs, and speckled with the unglamorous reminders of the human body's stubborn truth. Some lucky farmer will herd his sheep across it in the days to come, the waste vanishing into the earth, feeding the grass that feeds the lambs that feed the village through the bitter winter. A cycle as old as any fair. So tonight, lying under your soft blanket, clean sheets tucked around your shoulders, imagine that muddy field fading into the darkness behind your eyelids. Hear the echoes of laughter, the creak of a cart's wheel stuck in a rut, the faint, embarrassed shuffle of someone stepping away to answer nature's call under the watchful moon. And smile, because however messy it was, they lived it gladly, boots caked in filth, hands wrapped around a warm cup of ale, hearts beating to the same drum that hums under your ribs even now. Rest easy. No festival mud stains your floor tonight. No hidden patch of earth waits for you in the dark. Your pipes and tiles keep their secrets well. And you, lucky you, can drift off into dreams where the music plays on, the bonfire crackles, and the earth takes it all back without complaint. But here's the curious part. For all the filth and foulness, medieval people didn't simply resign themselves to stink. Not entirely. They fought back in ways both clever and heartbreakingly futile. A little daily ritual of sweet herbs and bitter hope, woven through the stones and timbers of their homes. Picture it, a narrow lane just after dawn. The street outside still slick from the chamber pots tipped at first light. The gutters carrying off their sluggish cargo. Yet, step inside one of these crooked timber houses, and you might find something softer waiting in the air. Imagine a young woman, let's call her Agnes, standing barefoot on the rushes spread across her cottage floor. She shakes out her apron, scattering yesterday's herbs that have gone brown and dusty. Then she pulls a small bundle from the beam above the hearth, sprigs of lavender, rosemary, maybe a handful of sweet woodruff if she's lucky. She crushes the leaves gently between her fingers, releasing their sharp, green scent into the morning chill. She tosses the fresh herbs onto the floor, mixing them into the rushes that cover the hard-packed earth. With each step she takes through the day, the oils crush underfoot, a faint perfume rising to battle the sour smell that seeps in from the street, from the pigs rooting at the threshold, from the privy pit behind the house that fills faster than the gong farmer can empty it. And it wasn't just floors. Picture bunches of dried flowers hung from ceiling beams, lavender, mint, rue. In grander homes, the wealthier might even sew tiny sachets of herbs to pin inside their tunics. Gloves were sometimes perfumed, so when the air grew too thick, you could press your hand to your nose and pretend you were somewhere cleaner, calmer, far from the drains and the latrines and the public pits that made up daily life. Even royalty wasn't immune. In castles, chambermaids would scatter rushes mixed with dried petals and aromatic herbs across the garderobe floors, hoping the faint, sweet scent might overpower the chill wind that carried up everything that lay rotting below. Scented gloves, pomanders, little balls of precious metal packed with spices, swung from belts or hung from neck chains, clinking softly with every step. A portable fortress against the world's smell. Picture a nobleman in his fur-lined cloak, pacing the great hall on a cold winter morning. He lifts a pomander to his nose, the scent of cloves, cinnamon, or ambergris drifting into his sinuses, while the smoke from the hearth clings to his hair and the garderobe's draft coils around his ankles. The scent is never enough to fully drown out the rest, but it's something, a flicker of control in a world that didn't allow much of it. And the streets themselves, well, even there, people tried. Vendors sold nosegays, tiny posies of fresh flowers and herbs, wrapped in scraps of cloth or tied with twine. Picture a market day, a woman pinning a posy to her bodice before she pushes through the crowded street. Each breath she takes comes filtered through rosemary and thyme, a small shield against the rank stew of the gutter. When plague swept through, and it always came back again and again. This war on smell became desperate. Doctors believed disease drifted on bad air, the dreaded miasma. So they stuffed their masks with dried petals and strong herbs, hoping the sweet scents would protect them from the invisible demons that danced through the stinking lanes. You can almost see them now, those grim, bird-like masks bobbing through the alleys, the sick cowering in doorways as a figure draped in black rustles by, the soft rattle of the pomander hidden inside the ropes. And in ordinary homes, mothers burned juniper branches or rosemary in the hearth, the pungent smoke curling into every corner. Prayers of scent against the creeping fear that filth meant death. Did it work? Not really. But in a world where waste poured from windows, where rivers carried yesterday's leaving straight to tomorrow's cup, any comfort was worth clinging to. Yet there's something sweetly human about it, isn't there? These sprigs of lavender, these tiny posies of mint. They were people's way of saying, we see the filth, but we won't let it swallow us whole. A tiny stand of beauty against the mud and the fleas and the chamber pots. A stubborn belief that even in the rankest gutter, a handful of crushed leaves could make you feel a little cleaner, a little safer, a little more like the world hadn't won just yet. So tonight, take a slow breath in your room. Maybe you catch the faint trace of clean linen, your shampoo on your pillow, the candle flickering sweet on your nightstand. Let it remind you of Agnes scattering her herbs at dawn, of a young noble lifting his perfumed glove to his nose, of the plague doctor packing rosemary into his mask before stepping out into the foul morning air. Close your eyes now. Imagine the tiny war they waged, scent against stench, hope against rot, and know that every soft breath you take tonight, clean and sweet, was won one sprig at a time by people who never stopped trying to make the world smell a little better, no matter how much the streets conspired against them. Meanwhile, imagine standing at the far end of a monastery's dormitory, where the stone corridor grows narrow and the air turns cold enough to lift goose flesh on your arms. A single candle sputters in its iron sconce, its flame dancing as you pass by, casting crooked shadows that follow you like silent brothers. Here lies the reared daughter, that plain, functional chamber where the monks lined up side by side on the cold benches, robes hitched just enough to do what they must. But the real story waits below, beneath the stone floor and the heavy beams braced against centuries of weight. Down there, a quiet, hidden artery keeps the monastery alive, or at least keeps it from drowning in its own waste. Picture the steps first. Uneven, worn smooth by 1,000 sandaled feet. The air grows damp as you descend, that particular coolness that seeps into your bones no matter how tightly you pull your cloak around your shoulders. The smell changes too. Up above, the air carries the stale trace of rushes and lavender, but down here it's raw, earthy, heavy with the sour bite of human leavings left to ferment in the dark. Now you stand in the undercroft, A low chamber beneath the latrines where a thin stream of water winds its way through a stone channel, always moving, always carrying. Clever monks of centuries past designed this. They diverted a nearby stream, forced it through these narrow channels beneath the benches above. The water trickles under the holes in the stone seats, washing away whatever the brothers drop from their cloistered routines. Primitive plumbing, but ingenious when you think about it. An early promise of the flush toilets you barely think about today. Kneel down if you dare. Look close to the stream. It's not clear. How could it be? Bits of straw and broken rushes swirl with darker things you'd rather not name. Now and then, a rat scurries along the slick ledge, its tiny claws scratching the moss-covered stones as it vanishes into a crack. The water hums its quiet song. A trickle, a splash, the occasional soft gurgle as it catches on a clump of debris stuck in the flow. Imagine Brother Matthew, a young lay brother, sleeves rolled, boots already wet at the ankles. He crouches at the edge of the stream, poking at a blockage with a long stick. It's not holy work, but it's necessary. If the channel clogs, the waste backs up through the stone seats above, flooding the dormitory with more than just uncomfortable drafts. There are stories, whispered over simple porridge and brown bread, about times when the stream froze solid in the dead of winter. Picture the panic. Icy air turning the trickle into a glassy, unmoving slab. Monks bundled in thick cloaks, working by the flicker of oil lamps, hacking at the frozen waste with iron rods while their breath curled around their faces in pale ghosts. All the prayers in the world couldn't stop the smell that seeped through the floorboards and clung to the choir robes at morning mass. Yet, for all its grimness, there's something oddly peaceful down here, too. The muffled world above feels far away. The soft chanting in the chapel, the scratch of quills in the scriptorium, the gentle footsteps in the cloister walk. Here, under the stones, you hear only the steady hush of the stream, the slow drip of condensation from the vaulted ceiling, the distant echo of water finding its way back to the earth. Some monks said the stream was like grace itself, always flowing, always cleansing, even the filthiest parts of human life. Perhaps that's just a comforting thought whispered to make the stench bearable. But standing here now, it's hard not to feel that strange, fragile truth. Even in a world where chamber pots tipped out windows, where festival fields became privies overnight, someone, somewhere, tried to guide the waste away, to give it a path, to keep their walls and souls a little cleaner. Imagine walking back up those stone steps now, the damp chill fading as you reach the rear door above. You pass the empty benches, worn smooth by robes and time. Maybe you pause a moment at the narrow window slit, the first hints of dawn brushing the garden beyond. You breathe in the clean morning air, sweeter, if only by contrast to what lingers below. So tonight, tucked into your sheets, pipes hidden behind warm drywall, a flush handle never more than a sleepy stumble away. Remember that quiet stream beneath the stone. Remember Brother Matthew's boots, slick with freezing muck. The whispered prayers that the water would keep flowing just one more day. And know that every hush of clean water you hear tonight, every sigh of a drain emptying away your troubles, is a distant echo of that hidden trickle under ancient stones. Close your eyes. Let the steady hush of that unseen stream drift through your dreams, carrying it all away, like grace, like mercy, like water always has. Meanwhile, let's slip through a narrow tower passage now. The stones rough under your fingertips, cold even in midsummer. Your candle guttering in its iron holder casts long, shifting shadows that dance on the walls like old ghosts. These stairs twist ever upward, winding behind the grand hall where the noble family feasts on roasted pheasant and spiced wine. But here, beyond the noise, tucked into the thick outer walls, waits the castle's humble secret, the garderobe. Picture it. A heavy oak door stands half open, the hinges worn by centuries of creaking back and forth. It swings inward with a soft groan, the air changing as you step through, from the smoke and warmth of the hearth to the sharp, earthy draft that curls up from the darkness below. You stand in a tiny stone chamber, no bigger than a closet. A single slit of a window lets in a blade of moonlight that cuts across the cold bench built into the far wall. The seat is polished smooth, not by design, but by the generations of noble backsides that have perched there in the hush of private necessity. Imagine a lady of the castle, her embroidered gown gathered in one hand, the weight of it bunched around her knees so it doesn't brush the damp floor. Her other hand rests on the wall for balance, fingers brushing the chill stone as she shifts her feet on the rushes scattered underfoot. Rushes that crackle faintly, mixed with dried rosemary or lavender, a fragile defense against the ever-present stench that seeps up through the chute below. If she's lucky, the garderobe might boast a padded seat, perhaps covered in stitched leather, softened by the wear of years. Maybe a carved wooden armrest on one side to lean on while she waits. Little touches of comfort in an otherwise cold corner of her world. The draft never quite leaves her alone here. It rises through the chute cut deep into the castle wall, a narrow shaft that carries her waist down, until it splashes into a pit or the castle moat below. Some chutes are straight, some cunningly angled to help the worst of it slide clear of the foundations. Ingenious, in theory. Less so when the wind shifts, sending the smell drifting back up to greet the next visitor. Picture the view if she dares peer through that narrow window. The black shape of the moat glinting in the moonlight, the ripple of reeds whispering in the breeze. She might see the outer wall, where unlucky servants patrol at night to check for cracks or loose stones. Best hope no one is beneath the chute at the wrong moment. Accidents are part of life here, whether you're a peasant dodging a chamber pot in town or a guard slipping on the slick stones beneath a lord's private privy. And so, the garderobe becomes more than just a toilet. It's a tiny sanctuary, a cold, drafty confessional where even a lady of fine silks and sweet perfumes must come face to face with the humblest truth of the body. Here, rank and title vanish, at least for a moment. Here, she is no different than the maid scrubbing rushes off the floor at dawn or the cook hurrying down the tower stairs before the morning meal. When she's done, she stands carefully, careful not to tip her candle or let her trailing sleeve brush the seat. Maybe she sprinkles a pinch of dried herbs onto the bench, an old habit, a small courtesy for the next visitor. Then she pulls her gown smooth again, lifts the latch, and steps back into the torchlit passage, the hush of her private moment swallowed by the echo of her slippers on cold stone. Behind her, the draft keeps whispering, carrying her secrets down to the moat or pit below, where rats skitter and the castle's foundations bear the quiet burden of every meal eaten in the great hall above. Some say that on stormy nights, when the wind howls against the towers, you can hear the distant splash and trickle echo through the walls, a reminder that no matter how grand the tapestries, how glittering the feasts, life always finds a way to humble even the finest lords and ladies. And when the garderobes clogged, as they inevitably did, it was the servants who climbed the narrow passageways with buckets and brooms, sleeves rolled, eyes watering in the stench. They scraped away what the draft could not carry, grumbling in hushed voices as they balanced over slippery stones, a single misstep away from a fall that might break more than just their pride. Yet for the noble family above, these corners remained mostly invisible, a humble necessity, hidden away like any other dirty truth they'd rather not dwell on. They'd pull the velvet drapes closed in the great hall, sip mulled wine beside roaring fires, and never mention the garderobe tucked just beyond the tapestry-hung wall. So tonight, pull your blankets close around you. Feel the warmth that never drifts away on a draft. Think of that lady's cold fingers brushing damp stone as she balanced in the moonlight, herbs scattered like a fragile blessing on the rushes beneath her feet. And when you hear the hush of your own plumbing tonight, the gentle swirl, the quiet flush that carries your secrets far from your bed, remember the stone chutes and the rats below, the faithful draft that never quite did its job well enough. And smile, because this small luxury, the warmth, the privacy, the clean hum of pipes hidden in your walls, was a dream they could never quite imagine. A dream built stone by stinking stone, until you could drift to sleep tonight, clean and safe, with no wind whispering up from the dark to remind you how gloriously human you really are. Picture a moonless night draped over the rooftops, the alleys slick with yesterday's rain, the gutters whispering their slow trickle of runoff toward the dark river beyond the walls. Most townsfolk have curled into their straw beds by now. The hearth fire is just warm embers, the shutters drawn tight against the wind. But somewhere, not far from the sleeping inns and echoing churches, a figure moves through the shadows, carrying the smell of the town's secrets on his shoulders. They called him the Gong Farmer. Gong, from the old word for dung, though some whispered darker nicknames under their breath. He was the man who climbed down into the privy pits when they filled to the brim, who waded knee-deep in other people's waste, who dug out the clotted layers of excrement, rotting straw, old bones, and broken chamber pots, all mashed into a sour, heavy stew. Imagine him now, a broad-shouldered man in a patched tunic, its sleeves slick and dark with grime. A rag tied across his mouth does little to keep the stink at bay, a stink so thick it soaks into his hair, his skin, the rough skin under his fingernails. He carries a spade hacked from warped timber, the iron edge battered from years of scraping against the stone walls of ancient pits. He works by lantern light, its faint circle bobbing in the blackness of the pit. Above him, the street is silent, but for the rustle of rats startled by the scraping of his shovel. Each shovelful lands in a heavy wicker basket at the lip of the pit, the wet sludge splattering softly on the packed dirt. A boy, his apprentice, maybe, drags the basket to the waiting cart, its wheels braced against the slope, the axle groaning under the weight of the town's unmentionables. Step closer. Listen to the soft squelch of the spade in the muck, the boy's boots slipping as he heaves the basket up. They say a good Gong farmer could empty a privy pit in a single night. Dozens of loads lifted up from the darkness, piled high in the cart. His pay? Not enough by any decent measure, but enough to feed his family when the winter winds howled through the cracks in their cottage walls. Yet the job was more than just the filth. It was danger, too. Picture a shaft dug so deep the air turns foul and close, heavy with fumes that make the world spin behind her eyes. One careless breath could drop a man where he stood. Some never climbed out again. The stories spread quick. A Gong farmer found stiff at the bottom of a pit, eyes wide to the blackness above, shovel still clutched in a hand gone cold. A family left behind to mourn, quietly grateful for the few coins tucked under a rotting floorboard. And when the carts were full, they rattled through the sleeping streets, iron-rimmed wheels bumping over the cobblestones. The smell drifted behind like a ghost no wall could keep out. If you cracked your shutter at dawn, you might glimpse them. Rough men huddled on the driver's bench, scarves pulled tight over their faces, driving the load beyond the town gates. Outside the walls, the waste was dumped in fields or spread over poor farmland. Some said it sweetened the soil, nature's way of taking filth and turning it into barley, cabbages, or onions for next season's pot. A cycle of stink and harvest, rotten bread, that kept the town's belly full while its streets stayed passable for another day. Yet for all their thankless work, Gong farmers were shunned. In the daylight, there were ghosts moving at the edges of markets and churchyards. Few would share a bench with them at the alehouse, and fewer still would let their daughters talk too long at the well. But when the privy pit overflowed, when the chamber pots turned rancid in the courtyard, the same folk came knocking, eyes lowered, coin in hand, voice low with the shame of asking for help that no one wanted to admit they needed. Imagine the man now, trudging home as the first birds wake. His boots leave sticky prints in the rutted lane. His shoulders stoop under the memory of the night's wait. He strips off his tunic at the door, scrubs his hands in a cracked basin, maybe burns a sprig of rosemary to fight the stench that clings to his hair. His children peek from the corner, eyes wide but unafraid. To them, he is just father. Just another man who does what he must to keep the walls standing and the hearth warm. And tomorrow night, he'll do it all again. So the baker can walk to the oven without sinking in a last month's waste. So the merchant can cross his yard without soiling his fine boots. So the town, so sure of its own importance, its pride, its piety, can forget for a while what it leaves behind when the shutters close. So tonight, tucked under your soft sheets, think of that cart rattling out the town gate. The quiet hero no one thanks, no one invites to sit by the fire. The man who climbs down into the pit so that you never have to know what's hidden under the floorboards you walk across so lightly. Let that thought soften you as you drift off, a quiet nod of gratitude for the hands that carry away the darkness so your dreams can stay clean. Picture the sky just starting to lighten, a thin bruise of dawn pushing back the last scraps of night. The air is cold and still, smelling faintly of damp earth and wood smoke drifting from far-off cottage chimneys. You stand on the muddy bank of the town's river, boots pressed into the soft earth that squelches under your heel. The cart rattles to a halt beside you, wheels caked with filth from the privy pits and chamber pots emptied under cover of darkness. The Gong farmer and his boy lift the baskets one by one, heavy, slopping loads that splash dark against the grass. One sharp shove, a tilt of the wrist, and the town's waste slips into the slow current, catching on twigs and reeds for a breath before the water takes it away. Out of sight, out of mind, or so they hoped. Now listen to the river. Its voice is soft, almost kind. It laps at the bank, a hush and a gurgle, as if it wants you to believe it can bear any burden, swallow any secret. By the time the sun fully crests the low hills, the river will look calm again, a rippling mirror carrying hints of the sky. A woman might come with her washing, scrubbing coarse linens on the same flat stone where last night's filth drifted by. A fisherman might launch a small boat, poles strapped along the side, eyes searching the shallows for eels or trout to sell at the market come dusk. The truth was, the river was everything: sewer, drinking well, laundry tub, and food basket. It flowed through the veins of the town, under stone bridges slick with moss, past weavers' cottages and butcher stalls, past the grand gates of manors that pretended their waste didn't trickle into it, too. Everyone trusted it, even as they cursed its smell on a hot summer afternoon when the water ran low and the banks turned black with what had nowhere else to go. Picture a mother kneeling at the edge now, her hands raw from scrubbing a child's tunic stained at the knees. She dips the cloth in the river, slaps it against a stone, watches the dirty water swirl away. Maybe she knows that upstream, someone else's chamber pot is emptying its sour cargo into the same flow. Maybe she knows and chooses not to think too hard. There is no other way. The well in the yard sometimes turns brackish when the rain fails. The barrel catches too little to last a dry month. So the river is her only choice, and she gives it her faith in exchange for the small hope it will take more than it brings back. A boy comes with a bucket, a wooden yoke over his bony shoulders, 2 pails bobbing at his sides. He scoops the water carefully, trying not to stir the muck that clings to the shallows. His mother told him to boil it before the stew is made, but sometimes there's no time. The firewood runs low. The soup must feed 5 mouths, and the market's hours wait for no one. So the water goes in as it is, a silent wager against the unseen sickness that drifts with the current. And yet, the river is live too. Children splash in its shallows on warm days, mud squishing between their toes, laughter rising above the hum of flies. Lovers slip away to its hidden bends, lying in the tall reeds with hearts racing while the current hums on, unconcerned with who they are or what they carry inside them. Merchants load their barges at the quays, barrels creaking as they sway downstream to the next bustling port, the town's lifeblood mixing with that of a dozen others. If you listen closely, really listen, you can hear the river's secret promise. I take it all, the filth and the hope, the sickness and the sweetness. I carry it far enough that you don't have to think about it, at least not until it comes back, because it always did. When the rains came heavy and the river burst its banks, the waste returned, black water seeping through dirt floors, flooding low cellars, turning gardens into foul ponds. When a summer sun shrank the flow to a trickle, the banks stank so badly that people pinned sprigs of mint to their collars just to pass by without retching. And when the plagues came, riding on fleas, rats, and yes, the river's hidden cargo, the people prayed, burned herbs, and still drew up buckets each dawn, because there was no other way to live. And so the river flowed on, an unspoken bargain between the townsfolk and the earth. We'll feed you everything we cannot bear. You'll give us back what we need to live. May we not take more than you can forgive. Tonight, as you lie wrapped in warmth, pipes and pumps carrying your waste far from sight, clear water tumbling from taps without fear or question. Think of that river, dark and slow, whispering its burdens under a pale dawn sky. Think of the boy balancing his buckets on thin shoulders, the mother scrubbing cloth that might never be truly clean, the fisherman casting his line into water that hid so many stories. And know that your own clean stream, the hush of your tap, the soft swirl down the drain, was born here in the river's patient flow, in its quiet promise to take what you could not keep. Rest easy. The water runs clear tonight. The old secrets drift far downstream. In your dreams, sweet and light, ride on currents they'll never see again. Imagine a narrow lane, hemmed in on either side by timbered houses leaning forward like old gossips whispering across the gutter. The rain has passed, but the puddles linger, slick brown pools catching moonlight between the lumps of straw and rotten scraps floating lazily toward the river. The air holds that sour tang that medieval townsfolk came to know so well. The scent of the chamber pots emptied at dawn. The offal from the butcher's block washed down the gutter. The waste from pigs and dogs, and people mingling under every bootstep. Most nights, this was just life. Annoying, unpleasant. A stain on your hem that you'd slap away with a dry rag before supper. But sometimes the stink changed. It deepened, thickened, became something heavy that clung to your tongue when you spoke and made you tug your cloak tighter around your shoulders, even on a warm day. Picture a house halfway down this lane. Its shutters pulled closed, though it's not yet full dark. A rushlight flickering behind the warped wooden boards. A family sits huddled inside. A father, wide-eyed, muttering prayers under his breath. A mother wringing a cloth between her hands until the edges fray. In the corner, a child lies twisted on a straw pallet, a damp rag on her forehead, doing nothing to break the fever that burns from the inside out. They know what's coming. They smell it before they see it. The waste pit behind the house is turned rancid. A foul, sickly sweet smell slips under the door every time the wind changes. They scatter herbs in handfuls across the rushes, burn rosemary in a cracked clay bowl, press scented gloves to their noses when they hover over the child's shivering body. But the smell is stronger than the herbs, always stronger. Down the lane, the neighbors know too. They pass by with collars pulled high, a posy of lavender or mint pinned to the neck. Mothers snap at children to stay close, to keep away from that house, that smell. For in this world, the stench is more than filth. It's a whisper that the pestilence has come again. Picture the town crier, his bell clanging hollow in the dawn mist. He stands on a rain-slick stone at the crossroads, unrolling a parchment with trembling hands. His voice cracks as he reads the edict. Keep your windows shut, your thresholds clean. Pray for deliverance. Watch for the swellings, the fevers, the strange black marks that bloom like bruises along the neck and armpits. But what good are warnings when the rats slip under doors, when the fleas bite as people sleep, when the river that feeds your stew also carries the plague's quiet kiss? The stench curls into every corner, weaving through the rushes on the floor, soaking into the rough wool of your cloak, clinging to your hair so that even the clean air outside smells faintly of fear. Imagine the plague doctor now, moving down the alley at dusk. His long, dark coat brushes the stones. His beaked mask, stuffed with cloves, lavender, and vinegar-soaked sponges, juts out like a nightmare bird's head. He steps carefully around the puddles, his boots squelching in the filth that no one dares clean now, for fear of what might rise from the disturbed rot. He raps on the door with his stick, a sharp, echoing sound that makes the neighbors flinch behind their shutters. Inside, the father cracks the door open, his eyes wild. The stench spills out like a sigh, warm, heavy, hopeless. The doctor steps in, his shadow swallowing the small room, his mask snuffling at the air. He knows what he will find. He scribbles a mark on the door as he leaves, a grim warning to those who pass by. Keep your distance. Pray harder, burn more rosemary, and hope the smell does not find its way into your door next. And so the lane holds its breath. The neighbors whisper over fences, in corners of the market where they clutch sprigs of mint like talismans. They watch the rats dart from gutter to gutter, fearless, fat on scraps and secrets. They tip their chamber pots more carefully, hoping the way slides far from their stoop, that the smell drifts down to the river before it can take root. Yet deep down they know, the filth cannot be banished with prayers alone. The stench that once signaled a careless life, a spilled pot, a blocked gutter, a privy pit left too long, now carries the weight of dread. Each sour waft on the night breeze feels like an omen that death itself is breathing at your window. And still they live. They sweep the rushes. They sprinkle herbs. They light candles for the dead. They wash their hands in cold, gray water and go on selling fish, baking bread, mending boots, falling in love, birthing babies who might never grow old enough to empty their own chamber pots one day. So tonight, wrapped safe in the hush of modern walls, the soft hum of clean water in your pipes, let that old smell drift like a ghost through your thoughts. Remember that for centuries, it was a language, a warning carried on the wind, a sign that even the smallest corner of waste could summon something bigger, darker, unstoppable. And feel that quiet hush of gratitude for the soap at your sink, the smooth flush that carries your secrets far away, the warmth that keeps every draft and shadow at bay. Sleep now, knowing that when morning comes, you will wake to clean air, bright sun, and the soft promise that the worst has drifted far downstream. Imagine a cold evening in a bustling town, when the air turns crisp and frost rims the eaves of the timbered roofs. The muddy streets still reek of the day. Chamber pots tipped at dawn, horses' hooves grinding muck into the cobbles, rain washing it all toward the river in a sluggish brown trickle. But here, behind a low wooden door sagging on its hinges, there waits an unlikely island of warmth, the bathhouse. Step inside. Feel the hush break like a bubble, the cold giving way to a wave of heavy steam that curls around your face, sticky and sweet with the scent of warmed water, sweaty skin, and the faint herbal edge of the soap they boil in big copper pots. Candles gutter in iron sconces, their glow dancing over the rough plaster walls. The low ceiling drips with condensation, tiny beads that gather and drop on the flagstones with soft plinks. In one corner, the keeper's wife stirs a vat of lye soap with a heavy wooden paddle. The smell bites the inside of your nose, sharp, acrid, mixed with the softer notes of lavender or rosemary thrown in by those who can afford the extra penny. Buckets slosh at her feet, sending warm rivulets snaking across the damp floor. Picture the bathers, a jumble of humanity squeezed together in the humid gloom. A group of apprentices lounge in the corner, giggling, splashing water at each other with soapy hands. A merchant reclines half submerged in a wooden tub, head tilted back, eyes closed in bliss as the knots of the road melt from his shoulders. Near him, a pair of women scrub each other's hair, exchanging gossip about whose husband snores loudest or who's behind on his debts this month. There are no neat partitions here, no tiled cubicles or discreet doors. Just a handful of big wooden tubs, the water kept warm by fire pits that roar at the far end of the room. In finer bathhouses, there might be a sequence, a warm soak, a scalding dip in a smaller tub, then a final cold splash that sends goosebumps racing down your spine. Some swear it tightens the skin and banishes evil humors. Others just like the jolt, a reminder that you're alive, clean, at least for an hour or two. Of course, not everyone comes just to scrub their skin. For many, the bathhouse is as much a place for business as for bathing. Here, merchants strike deals in low voices, their words drifting through the steam like secrets. Lovers slip behind thin curtains, giggling when the keeper's back is turned. A whiff of spiced wine and roasted meat drifts from the adjoining chamber. A small kitchen where you can order a bowl of broth while you drip dry by the fire. But listen closely. Beneath the laughter and chatter, you can hear it, the soft drip-drip of the used water, draining away through a crude channel carved into the stone floor. It runs down under the walls, trickles out the back into an open ditch that winds its way behind the houses, joining the same gutters that catch the chamber pots, the butcher's scraps, the spilled ale from the tavern door. So even here, even in this steamy room that promises a brief escape from the grime, the waste finds its way back. The bathwater, now a thin broth of sweat and soap and shed skin, slinks out to join the town's hidden river of filth. Sometimes, if you live downstream, you might wake early enough to catch a whiff, that sour sweet note that reminds you the bathhouse emptied its tubs during the night. And for all their soaking and scrubbing, the bathers leave no cleaner than their world allows. They step into the lane barefoot, feet slapping the cold stone, the last warmth of the bath slipping from their skin like a broken promise. By the time they reach home, their hems are splattered with the same muddy runoff, their toes blackened with the same oily film that clings to every gutter in town. Yet they come back, again and again, because that hour in the steam is a kind of mercy, the chance to peel off the filth and the worry, to feel, just for a moment, that the body is more than its stink and sores. To sink under the warm water, eyes closed, and imagine a world where the river always runs clean, The air always smells of lavender and soap, and no one has to fling open a shutter at dawn to shout "Guardy Lou" at an unsuspecting soul below. So tonight, draw your covers a little higher. Feel the warmth settle in your bones. Your own quiet bath, one that stays clean long after the steam fades. Listen for the hush of your pipes, the soft swirl that carries your troubles away. And remember the bathhouse keeper's wife, stirring her pot of lye by candlelight, trying to scrub a town's sins from its skin one bucket at a time. Sleep easy, knowing your water goes where you cannot see. Not back into the street, not in your neighbor's stew pot, but far away, whisked down hidden pipes that the people of this steamy, gossiping bathhouse could only have dreamed of. Imagine a cluster of crooked houses huddled so close together that the roofs seem to lean against each other for warmth. Between them runs a narrow passage, just wide enough for a single man to slip sideways. The walls damp where water trickles down from the gutter above. Step through. Feel your boots squish into the soft earth underfoot. A slick mix of rainwater, spilled ale, chamber pot runoff, and the ghost of last night's stew. At the end of the passage, in the black hollow where no torchlight reaches, squats the cesspit. It isn't grand. Nothing more than a sunken hole lined with rough stone, sometimes covered with a rotting board if the householder is careful, sometimes left open to swallow whatever the household scrapes into it. The smell strikes you first, a low, sour breath that seems to live in the back of your throat long after you've turned away. It clings to your hair, your sleeves, the folds of your cloak. Picture a maid slipping out into the passage at dawn, a battered pail heavy on her hip. She tips it into the pit, the splash muffled by layers of old straw and last month's secrets. She wipes her hands on her apron, mutters a quick prayer that she doesn't slip on the slick stones. Her feet shuffle away, back to the warmth of the kitchen where the kettle hums and the smell of oat porridge tries to drown out what she's left behind. Now stay a while. Peer closer. Beneath the scum and the scraps floats a dark archive of daily life. Bones from a chicken, a half-crushed eggshell, the handle of a wooden spoon that snapped in someone's hand weeks ago. Hair combings, blood from a nosebleed, the faint glitter of a lost ring no one will ever find again. In these pits, the town's hidden history stews away, layer upon layer, season after season. But a cesspit doesn't stay hidden for long. When it fills, and it always fills, it lets you know, the smell thickens, swelling up through the floorboards, slipping through the cracks in the wattle and daub. On warm days, flies gather in shimmering clouds. Their hum a lullaby that keeps you awake at night. And when the rain falls heavy, the pit swells like a drunkard's belly, seeping through the earth until it seeps into your feet, your bed, your supper pot if you're truly unlucky. So they come, the men no one talks about until they're needed, the night soil men. Imagine them now, clumping down the passage in boots that squelch with every step. They haul with them wooden barrels, rope slings, and long-handled shovels hacked from timber and iron. Their eyes water behind cloths tied tight across their mouths, but the smell always finds a way in. One climbs down, feet braced on the slick edge, boots sinking an inch into the stinking slop with a slow, wet sigh. He works fast, scoop, lift, dump, the way slopping into the barrels with a sickly splash. Another man steadies the rope sling, hoisting each barrel up with a grunt, arms straining as the contents slosh against the sides. They murmur to each other, a dark joke, a curse about the landlord who let the pit fester too long, a prayer that the rope doesn't snap while a man's still knee-deep in the muck. When the barrels are full, they roll them out through the lanes, wheels carving ruts in the soft earth, the smell drifting behind like an unwanted guest. If you catch them at dawn, you'd pull your cloak tight over your nose, step back into a doorway until the procession rattles past. But you'd watch too, half grateful, half repelled, knowing they've carried away something you'd never want to face in the daylight. Where does it all go? Out past the gates, down to the fields, or the riverbank where they tip it out into waiting ditches. Some of it feeds the soil, a grim sort of recycling that turns waste into green shoots come spring. But some of it just seeps into the earth, joins the hidden veins that run beneath the town's feet, waiting to rise up again in unexpected places. A cellar flooded after heavy rain. A well gone sour when no one can afford a new one. A cough that settles in the chest and never quite lets go. Yet the pits remain, always waiting, always hungry. A reminder that for all their faith and prayers and cunning stonework, the people of this world were bound to the oldest truth. What you put in must come out, and what you cast away must go somewhere. So tonight, as you lie wrapped in warmth, the hush of modern plumbing tucked safely behind the walls, think of that made slipping through the passage at dawn. Think of the night soil men, boots caked, shoulders bent, their barrels rolling through the mist like ghosts of the town's forgotten filth. And breathe easy, because you'll never stand ankle deep in a pit that remembers every meal you've ever eaten, every cup you've ever drained. Your secrets swirl away with a soft flush, carried far from your door before you even turn out the light. Sleep well. The pit is long buried now, just a memory hidden under paved streets and flower beds where children laugh and dig, never knowing what the earth once held. And the darkness that swallowed so many secrets now lies quiet, far beneath your dreaming head. Imagine the hush of dawn over a grand medieval castle, walls rising from the morning mist like the spine of some ancient beast. The pennants ripple high on the battlements, catching the first breath of sun as it creeps above the forest beyond. Inside, servants hurry through cold stone passages, slippers slapping on flagstones, braziers lit in dark corners to push back the chill that seeps through mortar and timber. Behind the tapestries, hidden in the quiet places that polite society never mentions, wait the castle's garderobes. Those narrow chambers built into the outer walls, balanced precariously above the empty air. But in the king's private chambers, it was different. A royal backside could not be perched over a cold stone hole like any humble yeoman's. No, the king had his own ritual, one that required its own keeper, the groom of the stool. Picture this, a vast chamber at dawn, the king's bed draped in furs and silks, a brazier crackling nearby. A soft knock at the door. The groom of the stool enters, a man trusted above almost all others, for in this small matter of nature, there could be no secrets. He carries a small, padded seat, the closest thing to a throne for the king's more private business. Some were just simple stools with a hole and a chamber pot beneath. Others were elaborate pieces of carved oak, draped in velvet, lined with embroidered linen that smelled faintly of lavender and beeswax polish. Imagine the king, powerful enough to command armies, to sign death warrants with a flick of a ringed hand, now sitting half naked in the hush of dawn, trusting another man to wipe him clean when he is done. The groom does not flinch. This is his duty, an honor twisted up in humility. He keeps the linens fresh, the basin warm, the pot discreetly emptied when the royal belly turns sour from too much rich venison and wine. In the corner, a servant waits with a silver ewer of warm water and soft cloths. A sprig of rosemary might burn nearby, its pungent smoke weaving through the tapestries, battling the draft that sneaks under the chamber door. Yet even the finest herbs could not chase away the deeper truth. The king was no different than the poorest peasant crouched behind his humble cottage. His body, for all its royal blood, made the same demands as any other. Some monarchs were embarrassed by this ritual. Others reveled in it, weaving gossip and secrets into these private moments. A well-placed groom of the stool could become one of the king's most trusted confidants. He knew the rhythms of the sovereign's body, after all, and more importantly, he was close enough to whisper counsel while the rest of court waited outside the door. In those cramped chambers, power and filth entwined, just as they did in the muddy lanes below. And where did it all go? The king's chamber pot, once lifted from its padded box, was discreetly carried through hidden passageways by another unlucky servant, down spiral staircases slick with centuries of damp, through the cold hush of stone corridors, until it joined a stream that trickled out through the garderobes, or was dumped into the same pits and drains that swallowed the secrets of every soul in the castle, noble or not. Imagine the royal laundry, maids boiling the soiled linens in great copper cauldrons, their hands raw from soap and steam. Imagine the castle rat catcher lurking near the cesspits with a sack and a club, the creatures fat on scraps of royal waste, their squeals echoing off stone walls older than memory. Imagine the stonemasons called in when the chutes cracked, threatening to leak filth into the cellars below the banquet hall. A king's humbling truth always waiting just beneath the marble floors. And when dignitaries visited from faraway kingdoms, they brought their own stools, beautiful carved boxes packed with herbs and lined with silk, carried behind them in their processions like hidden relics. They, too, were reminded that crowns do not keep the stench away, that velvet curtains and golden basins only mask what everyone knows but never says aloud. So tonight, draw your blanket higher on your shoulders. Feel the warmth that no draft can steal. Listen to the soft hush of your plumbing, that private throne waiting behind a locked door. Yours alone, with no groom to stand by, no secrets to whisper in a cold dawn room. Think of the king on his velvet seat, eyes half closed as a trusted servant bows low, cloth in hand, head filled with all the hidden burdens of a realm that might never thank him. And smile, because in this small corner of life, you reign supreme, free of tapestries, chamber pots, or the quiet clatter of footsteps on stone stairs. Your secrets vanish with the hush of a flush, and your sleep remains sweet, your dreams unsullied by the humbling truth that even kings could never bury as deep as they wished. Imagine a narrow street at dawn, the cobbles slick with last night's rain. Smoke curls from crooked chimneys, carrying the smell of peat and wetwood. The air is heavy with the ghost of chamber pots emptied before sunrise, a sour note that mingles with the warm promise of bread baking behind shuttered windows. In this chill hush, a figure moves slowly from door to door, pushing a creaking handcart that rattles with every rut in the lane. This is the rag and bone man, a humble scavenger, sleeves rolled to the elbows, boots patched so many times they barely keep out the mud. He carries a long iron hook at his belt, a battered sack slung over one shoulder, and eyes that miss nothing, scraps of cloth, broken crockery, scraps of metal glinting in the gutter. To some, he's just another beggar. But look closer, and you'll see he's part of the hidden machinery that keeps the town turning, a quiet collector of what others throw away. Picture him now, pausing by a tavern's back wall where last night's revelers left more than spilled ale behind. He squats low, nose wrinkling, and fishes out a scrap of greasy cloth stuck to the edge of the drain. Into the sack it goes. Later, the rag will be boiled, shredded, maybe sold on to a paper maker who knows how to turn old linen into precious sheets for letters and books. Further down the lane, he stops at a butcher's gutter. A cracked bone juts from the muck, glistening white under the dawnlight. With the iron hook, he snags it, wipes it on his sleeve, and drops it into the handcart. Later, it will be sold to a gloom maker or tossed into a pot to be boiled down for broth that might stretch a beggar's meal a few nights more. Nothing is wasted, not if you're desperate enough clever enough. And waste wasn't only gathered from the street. Some folk knew to hold back scraps for the rag and bone man. A bundle of old rushes swept from the floor, a chipped jug no longer worth repairing. Even ashes from the hearth sifted for nails that might still be hammered straight. In return, he might hand over a few pennies, or patch a broken chair, or share a mouthful of broth by the market wall. A quiet barter, half survival, half small kindness. Picture the children who followed him, barefoot, grinning despite the cold, eyes bright with the thrill of the hunt. They dart ahead to pry nails from old boards or dig in the soft mud behind the tanner's yard for scraps of hide. Sometimes they find more than they expect. A lost trinket, a bent coin, a scrap of cloth good enough to stitch into a patch for a little sister's ragged dress. And in the soft pockets of the town, where the waste festered in corners no one cared to sweep, the rag and bone men found their best harvest. The alley behind the dyer's workshop, where vats of foul-smelling water sloshed into the street, trailing a rainbow film of chemicals and half-rotted fabric scraps. The ditch by the slaughterhouse, where bones, hooves, and offal lay tangled in the mud, waiting for someone brave enough to carry them away before the dogs and rats claimed their share. They were not celebrated, these quiet gleaners of filth. If you passed one in the street, you might turn your nose away, the smell of his cart clinging to him like a second skin. But you'd still haggle with him when you needed a length of old rope or a scrap of cloth to patch a hole in your roof. And you'd still watch for him at dawn, grateful that someone else stooped to carry away what you couldn't bear to keep. Because in this hidden economy of scraps and rot, everything had a price. Ashes fed the soap boilers. Bones fed the glue makers. Rags fed the paper presses. Even the worst filth, the thick black sludge scraped from gutters and cesspits, could be spread on tired fields, feeding next year's barley and rye. A cycle so unglamorous, so necessary, that it hummed beneath the grand facades of churches and the velvet drapes of the king's private rooms alike. So tonight, as you curl under a soft blanket that no rag and bone man will ever need to touch, think of that humble cart rattling down the lane at dawn. Think of the quiet hands that lifted scraps from the mud, turned rot into ink, waste into warmth, filth into the faint promise that next season's bread might rise a little higher than the last. And smile, because beneath your feet, beneath your bright lights and hidden pipes, that same truth still hums. Waste never truly disappears. It's only carried onward, reshaped by the hands brave enough to find value in what the world wants to forget. Sleep easy now, knowing that tonight, your scraps are whisked away without a second thought. But once they fed a family, bought a cup of ale, stitched a patch on a child's sleeve. And somewhere deep in the past, a rag and bone man tips his cap to you, hook at his belt, eyes bright for the next scrap worth saving. Imagine passing under a low archway, your boots brushing against the smooth stones worn by centuries of sandaled feet. The monastery garden waits just beyond, hidden behind high walls that keep the town's noise at bay. Inside, dawn's chill still lingers in the furrows between rows of cabbages, beans, and medicinal herbs. The air smells clean here, or at least cleaner than the muddy lanes you've left behind. Earthy, green, with a faint undercurrent of manure and rotting straw, the honest perfume of a place where nothing is wasted for long. Picture a young monk standing in the early light, robes tucked up at the waist, his hands sunk deep into the soil. He spreads mulch between the neat lines of onion shoots, breaking up the clumps with careful fingers. But this mulch isn't just straw or fallen leaves. No, it's what's left after the privies have been emptied, after the waste is broken down in quiet heaps behind the garden wall. Here, in these hushed plots, the monks mastered a quiet, ancient alchemy. They turned filth into food. The same waste that stank beneath the rear door, that trickled down the chutes under cold stone benches, was carried out, mixed with straw, old rushes, and the ash from the kitchen hearth. It festered for weeks, steaming gently as the winter wind turned the top layers crisp and brown. Then, come spring, the brothers forked it into the soil, murmuring soft prayers that the cabbage heads would swell fat and the beans would climb high enough to catch the sun. Imagine Brother Thomas, stooped over a row of leeks, his breath puffing white in the dawn. His fingers smell faintly of lavender from the rushes scattered on the cloister floors the night before. But beneath that lingers the dark, sour tang of the compost heap, a scent he's long since learned to carry without flinching. He knows this filth is life. That waste feeds the soil feeds the vegetables, and the vegetables feed the brethren through the long, thin months when the wind rattles the shutters and the lantern burns low beside the scripture pages. Beyond the vegetable rows, small fruit trees stand in crooked lines, pears, apples, quinces. Their roots dig down through centuries of buried scraps. Cracked bones from the refectory table, fish heads buried after the Friday meal, scraps of stale bread soaked in rain and turned to soft, loamy humus. When spring comes, white blossoms drift on the breeze like blessings. And when the fruit drops, bruised and sweet, the monks gather it in wicker baskets and carry it into the kitchens, where the cook stirs it into thick stews that warm the belly better than any prayer alone. But the garden isn't just food for the body. Look closer. See the narrow beds of sage and rosemary, the spiky rows of rue and wormwood. These herbs are more than flavor. They're a fragile bulwark against the sickness that blooms as easily as cabbages in the damp monastery halls. A handful of lavender thrown on the rushes. A sprig of mint crushed in the palm. Pressed to the nose when the privies reek too strongly to pray in peace. A strong infusion of wormwood for the brother who coughs too long, his breath sour with fever. And when the monks step into the chapel for morning prayers, their sandals still wet with dew and the scent of tilled earth clinging to their robes, they carry the garden with them. The filth they buried under apple roots becomes the sweetness of pie on the refectory table. The waste washed away in cold stream water under the reredotor becomes the cabbages they slice for humble broth. The stink is never truly gone. But here, behind the high stone walls, it becomes something more than shame. It becomes salvation in its own quiet, muddy way. Picture the compost heap now, steaming in the low sun. Imagine a young novice with sleeves rolled, forking the heap to keep it turning. He hums softly, a psalm, maybe, or just a tune to keep the smell at bay. He knows that somewhere, deep in that black stew, scraps of last season's bread crust and last winter's rushes are breaking down, becoming the tender green of next spring salad. He doesn't flinch when a rat darts out. It's just part of the cycle. Waste, rat, soil, root, fruit, table, and back again. So tonight, tucked safe in your modern hush, your pipes and drains whisking filth far away before you ever glimpse it. Think of those walled gardens, the quiet steam of the compost pile, the bowed heads of monks turning rot into life one handful at a time. Your salad tonight, your loaf of bread, your sweet apple pie, all born of that same humbling cycle. Waste hidden, buried, forgiven, then offered back as grace. A reminder that even the foulest corner of life can feed the spirit if you dare to look at it closely enough. Sleep now. Let your dreams drift through rows of herbs shivering in the dawn breeze, through apple blossoms catching the first pale sun. And know that somewhere, far below the tiled floors and neat pipes, the earth still remembers how to take what we'd rather forget and turn it into something that makes us whole again. Imagine a narrow track winding away from the last crooked houses of a market town. The air tastes fresher here, at least for a mile or two. Fields stretch out on either side, furrows combed neat by a farmer's plow. A hedge leans over the road, heavy with the sharp scent of crushed nettles and dry earth. You can almost believe, for a heartbeat, that the filth of the town stays behind you. Picture the traveler, boots scuffed, cloak patched at the shoulders, a bundle slung across a weary back. Maybe he's a peddler, a pilgrim, a wandering tinker with pots clanging softly in the dawn hush. He carries his life with him, but he cannot escape the simple truth of his body. When nature calls out here, there's no chamber pot waiting under a bed, no night soil man to scrape it away while you dream. It's just him, the empty road, and the nearest ditch or hedgerow to shield his dignity from any passing soul. Imagine him pausing near a bend in the track, glancing left and right. He ducks into the brush, boots crackling through the brambles. There, beneath an ancient oak, he crouches, cloak bunched up around his waist, hoping no other traveler rounds the bend too soon. The breeze tugs at the hem of his tunic, and the chill reminds him there's nothing elegant about being human. Out here where the world pays no mind to your station or your prayers. When he's done, he scuffs a bit of earth over the damp patch, a habit learned from years on the road, a thin defense against flies that breed in the heat of the midday sun. If he's thoughtful, he'll break a branch, snap off a handful of leaves, a primitive, prickly toilet paper for a world that offers no softer kindness. And he's not alone. Behind him, in the slow curve of the road, a string of pilgrims winds toward the next town. Women in rough woolen cloaks, boys chasing after them with blisters on their heels, an old man leaning on a staff. They'll stop too, one by one, slipping into the hedges, finding a quiet dip behind a low rise. The smell of fresh earth and wild garlic tangles with a more sour scent they leave behind. A tiny reminder that even faith must bend to the needs of the belly. And so the roadside becomes its own kind of hidden privy, an unmarked, ever-moving latrine that follows the traveler's footsteps across kingdoms and seasons. Come spring, the rain washes it all into the furrows where new wheat takes root. Come summer, the sun bakes the hidden droppings into the dusty tracks, crumbling under cartwheels, mixing with the hoof prints and scattered straw. Some roads gain a reputation, a stretch of forest path where travelers swear the brambles reek on warm days, where you hold your breath as your horse picks its careful way through the dappled shade. Or that bend by the stone cross where pilgrims pause to pray, and, if no one's watching, slip behind the shrine to do what they must before the next weary mile. Imagine the roadside inns, the scattered, coaching houses that the main routes between towns. Picture the low stable yard, the muddy paddock behind the barn. No fancy garderobe here, just a corner of the yard, a half-rotted board balanced over a shallow trench. If you're lucky, you'll have straw to scatter after. If not, the smell settles under the stable walls, and you sleep in the loft above it, grateful at least for dry hay under your tired bones. And yet, in this constant shuffle of feet and filth, life hums along. The same ditch that hides a peddler's secrets feeds the brambles heavy with blackberries come August. The same hedgerow where a tired pilgrim crouched in the night shivers with white flowers when the frost breaks, feeding the bees that hum across the roadside fields. The open road is a mirror, a place that reminds the traveler he cannot outrun what he carries inside him. No matter how far you walk, how many new towns you pass, how many miles you stack under your boots, your body ties you back to the earth in the oldest, most humbling way. So tonight, tucked into your soft bed with walls between you and the wind, think of that road, the hush of the hedgerows, the hush of your own breath. Think of the thousands who paused on the same path, centuries apart, slipping into the shadows for a few stolen minutes to bury what the body could not keep. And feel that quiet gratitude for the sturdy door you closed behind you, the hidden pipes, the clean hush of a flush that never lets the wind carry your secrets away. The road goes on, far beyond your dreams tonight. But here, your sleep stays clean, the fields stay distant, and the only rustle in the hedgerow is the soft whisper of a memory long buried in the mud. Imagine standing on the edge of a small town just after dawn. The fields fade behind you. The river drifts sluggishly past somewhere beyond the low rise. And before you stretch the yards and sheds of those whose trades keep the town clothed, fed, and watered, but at a price. The butcher, the tanner, the brewer, three cornerstones of any bustling market town, each one knee-deep in the same old cycle. Take the living world, break it down, sell what's good, and bury or spill what's foul. Picture the butcher's yard first. The gates creak, open on iron hinges that groan like a sore knee in the winter cold. Inside, the ground is slick with straw and old blood that never quite drains away. You see the carcasses swinging from thick wooden beams, skin pulled tight and shining where the cleaver's edge split the hide from flesh. Every cut sends scraps tumbling to the yard floor. Gristle, bones, hooves, scraps too tough for the stew pot. Where does it all go? Some is tossed to the dogs that prowl at the fence line, noses twitching, teeth flashing in the dawn's thin light. But the rest? Down into shallow pits at the yard's far edge, covered hastily with straw to keep the worst flies at bay. Though they always come anyway, a humming cloud that drifts into the lanes beyond, carrying a whisper of that sour, coppery smell that clings to your cloak long after you've passed. Just beyond the butcher's fence stands the tanner's yard, worse in some ways. Picture the long racks draped with animal skins, hair matted with old blood and mud, dripping onto the churned earth below. Tanning is no gentle craft. The hides must be soaked in pits of urine and old dog dung. The ammonia breaks the fat and loosens the hair. That stench is sharp, eye-watering, clinging to the inside of your nose long after you step away. Imagine the tanner's apprentice, a boy not much older than 12, hauling a sloshing bucket down to the pit. He sloshes the brew across the raw hides, gagging when a breeze blows the steam back into his face. In one corner, piles of scraped hair and bits of rotting flesh steam softly in the morning sun. The runoff trickles down narrow trenches, joining the flow that winds through the town's edge, slipping into the same stream that turns the mill wheel and feeds the brewer's barrels just a few houses down. And so we come to the brewer, a friendlier face, perhaps, but no cleaner for it. Imagine stepping into the low yard behind the alehouse. The scent here is different. Yeasty, sweet, tangy with the bite of barley mash fermenting in huge wooden vats. The brewers toss spent grain by the shovelful into the same ditches that carry the tanner's rinse water and the butcher's awful runoff. Pigs nose through the slop, rooting for the last warm morsels before the mess drifts onward to the river. And the people drink it all in, not the waste, but the ale it feeds. They crowd into the alehouse at dusk, mugs pressed to lips, eyes bright from the warmth in their bellies. No one spares a thought for the stink that hums under the yard boards, the sour mash that clogs the ditch when the rains come too quick. They've lived beside it so long that the smell becomes a kind of background lullaby, proof that work is done, ale is brewing, cloth is curing, meat is salted and ready for the market stall. Picture the mothers tugging their children away from the ditches at play, shooing them from the pits behind the tanner's fence where the ground squelches with secrets best left undisturbed. Picture the housewife who passes the brewer's yard each dawn, apron corner pressed to her nose as she hurries to market, a basket tucked under her arm. the smell of mash and waste settling in her hair like an unwelcome guest. Yet for all its stench, this filth fed the town, coins clinking into pockets, barrels rolling onto carts bound for fairs and distant manors, hides turned into sturdy boots, cloaks, belts, bones boiled down into glue for the joiner's bench. Even the runoff seeped into the edge of fields where hungry barley drank deep, turning rot into green stalks that would rise again for the next season's ale. So tonight, as you lie wrapped in clean sheets, the hum of your neighborhood distant and sweet, think of the butcher's yard, the tanner's pits, the brewer's mash bubbling away behind those crooked fences. Think of the boots on your feet, the ale that once warmed a weary traveler's belly, the cloth that wrapped a farmer's shoulders on a bitter night, all born from a town's willingness to stand ankle-deep in filth and seem more than just waste. Breathe deep, clean air, soap, fresh laundry drifting through your room. Feel the hush of your plumbing carrying everything away, hidden behind drywall and tiles, so your nose never wrinkles, your sleeves never stink, your boots never slip on a yard gone slick with the spoils of survival. Sleep easy now. For once, your dreams owe nothing to the pits and ditches that once hummed under every town's heartbeat. But if you listen closely, you might hear an echo, the clink of a butcher's cleaver, the soft splash of a tanner's brush, the warm bubble of a brewer's mash. And know that even the finest comforts rise from the humblest corners, the filthiest ditches, the unspoken bargain that nothing ever really disappears.